So we're shooting down balloons with some F-22 Raptors and some AIM-9X Sidewinders. At least that's what it looks like we've been doing for the last week, and maybe even for some weeks to come. Let's take a look at some current events. By the way, I'm Brian. Thanks for joining me on the channel today. Normally, I wait for events to kind of settle down a little bit so I can get some context on them and get some really in-depth research and get the facts really nailed down before I put out a video. But this is one that is developing, and some of the aspects I consider to be really, really important. So let's just dive right on in here. As is well known by now, on February 5th, just about a week ago, a Chinese spy balloon, as they call it, was allowed to overfly both Alaska, Canada, and the entirety of the United States and look at some of our most sensitive nuclear sites in the nation, and then was finally shot down when it got over the waters off of South Carolina, again by an F-22 Raptor using an AIM-9X Sidewinder missile. This caused an uproar, and mainly it was caused an uproar because a small town newspaper in Montana happened to get a good picture of the balloon, which was sitting at about 65,000 feet. It was enormous, and so it stood out visually. So it's hard to track balloons for most people and most equipment. But they had the picture, they ran a story on it, and then it hit the national airwaves like a flying sack of poop. You know, it really spread all over the place. This is just a shock to the nation. And over the next couple of days, after it was spotted, actually it was spotted before then, but over the next couple of days, there was all kinds of calls. Shoot it down, get rid of it, do whatever you got to do to get it down. And the military waited until it was over the waters off of South Carolina to shoot it down. Now, this is where things get a little murky. The Biden administration claims that they had given the military the authorization to shoot it down much earlier than that they had known about it all along and been tracking it the entire time, that they chose to do it off of South Carolina to ensure there were no civilian casualties. Okay, I can give you that one. And in fact, I actually have less problems with that than you'd think, mainly because it was an enormous balloon and there would have been collateral damage on the ground if they just downed it willy-nilly. A rare tidbit of restraint, you might say. But the part that got me was as the balloon was flying over the nation, the Biden administration declared that there had been Chinese spy balloons over the U.S. during the Trump administration, 3 of them, in fact. And they were, quote, discovered after he left office. So, that's not good. That indicates that we have a national defense that is woefully inadequate. But it gets weirder than that. According to this, General Mattis knew about those 3 balloons, and he did not tell Donald Trump about them as the commander-in-chief. And that means that gets really weird then as well, because now we're getting into the military. Let me just back up one step here. The military in this country was specifically designed to respond to a civilian leadership. The commander-in-chief of the military of the U.S. is, in fact, an elected civilian. That puts the entire military under the control of the civilians, not the other way around. Mattis doesn't tell the commander-in-chief about a spy balloon floating over the territory. That's a problem. But that's for a different reason. But I'll come back to that in a little bit because there's still some more history to tell. We've got China then declares that it's just a weather balloon. That's got problems too, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. So China's claiming it's a weather balloon. The U.S. is claiming they were tracking it all along, that there were ones during the Trump administration, but with no proof. And General Mattis says that, oh yeah, they were totally there, I just didn't tell anybody. It's really a bad day when your go-to story ends up having more holes in it than Swiss cheese. But let's continue forward. Then we have Alaska. Now that we've caused the entire nation to panic and get all this stuff together, all of a sudden there's another unidentified object. Not a balloon. They don't say it's a balloon. Just an unidentified object that was over Alaska. They shoot that one down before it can get anywhere. Then in Canada, a few days later, they shoot down another unidentified object over the Yukon at Justin Trudeau's request. Then just today, they shoot down yet another one over the Great Lakes. So what are we really looking at here? Well, this kind of title right here kind of puts it together for us. It's not acceptable. Now, I've seen a lot of, this whole thing is not acceptable, and that's the problem. So let's go for it piece by piece here. The first balloon overflies the entire U.S. They say they were tracking it the whole time at 65,000 feet. Why didn't they bring it down before then? They knew what its payload was. They have an air defense identification zone that they enforce strictly in the U.S. for any unidentified object of this type. And yet they didn't publish it or publicize the activity. They say they were tracking it the whole time. Yeah, I'm not so convinced. Even so, let's say they were. They decided to not say anything until it became public. And they were just going to let it fly over. Politically, this is a disaster. It's showing that we have a totally unsecure airspace that could be easily flown over with a payload of any type. And so the first response is, they did it 3 times under Trump. And I've looked. I found no news articles. I found no contemporary reports. The closest I got was one guy on the YouTube comment section that says he remembers talking about the balloons, but I certainly don't. And I never remember seeing anything about balloons during the Trump years. And the statements are that they overflew just basically right off the territorial waters of Florida. Around Florida, they flew over the very south end of Texas. Very incidental things. That didn't actually hit any sites or anything like that. Again, it seems awfully convenient. And then they said that they didn't discover it until after Donald Trump had left office. What, did they go back and check the security tapes? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And then you tack on General Mattis, his statement, at least his reported statement, that he decided not to tell Trump about him just because he might have overreacted. And so we've now gone from incompetent to doubly incompetent to what can only be described as a military coup. And I don't use those words lightly because the military is subject to the civilian authorities in this country. By even suggesting that they avoided or bypassed the properly elected official, it indicates that the military is no longer under control. It's no longer reporting to the civilian administration. It's no longer allowing itself to be monitored, watched over, regulated by the government of the United States. And I know some people are going to say, well, it's just Trump. It could have, Trump was, such a threat that clearly it was appropriate to do so. How would you feel if the reverse was said? That Joe Biden has shown serious signs of mental degradation, and therefore the military should no longer respond to the Biden administration. That's grounds for a military coup right there. Third world countries that have military juntas start in this type of thing. So it is a bad sign, if true. Understand, I have no good confirmation that it is true. And I really want some. I want somebody to provide me a picture off, with some dates of each of these other incidents, where they were, their GPS coordinates, their paths. And I want an actual, some proof. Nobody's got the proof. And there's the problem. So we got a Pentagon that either is incompetent or is perfectly competent but is untrustworthy. It's not a good look. It's not a good thing. And I'm not even saying look now. It's not a good thing. The military should always respond to and be governed by the civilian administration, or we're one step away from a military dictatorship overthrowing our nation. At least that's how it looks to me. These additional balloons seems awfully convenient. It's like they showed up just in time to try and give the feel that our current administration is actually capable of handling this situation. But on top of that, the story from China about a weather balloon, that's the exact same cover story we used for the U-2 overflights over Russia. That it was a weather reconnaissance mission, not a spy mission. They're paying attention to their history, and they know we don't have any moral high ground on this one. And when you don't have the moral high ground, the only way you can control things is through the proper application of force and diplomacy. China's kind of an interesting one, though. They just reported they shot down a balloon over their own airspace that was lingering around one of their naval bases. Also awfully convenient. Be interesting to know more. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have something you want to send me to review or take a look at, please use the email address brianlusk@zohomail.com so that you can be sending those links to me without getting hit by the YouTube censors. You have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on the next one.